Welcome to Imagine the Possibilities, hosted by Edward Dow Bartling. Ed graduated in 2004 from NAU with a master's in business administration. His business career in the insurance industry encompasses over 45 years. He is the Chief Operating Officer and Partner for Financial Markets Incorporated, an insurance wholesale brokerage organization located in Rapid City, South Dakota. Prior to joining Financial Markets, Ed was a managing director for New York Life Insurance Company for 25 years. Ed has presented keynote speeches, workshops, and seminars in 12 states and 3 foreign countries, and has written numerous articles relating to the insurance industry. He is a member of several professional organizations, has testified before Congress, and represented South Dakota in an industry trip to South America. Ed is an active volunteer with the Boy Scouts in his church. He has done missionary work in Panama, and in 2004 was reunited with his birth family in Panama. He is a contributing author for Chicken Soup for the Soul, a member of the Black Hills Dutch Oven Society, and has played racquetball for over 20 years with the same faithful group of friends. Ed and his wife LaDonna reside in Rapid City, and their son Justin is a partner in an advertising firm in Brooklyn, New York. Today, Ed will be presenting and urging us all to imagine the possibilities. Welcome, Ed, and thank you so much for hosting this webinar today.
Well, thank you so much, Tammy, for inviting me here. Esta es mi historia. Indeed, this is me. This is my story. Now, we have a PowerPoint before us here, but it's not going to be, hopefully, the typical PowerPoint, and there's not going to be any bullets that you're going to see and things like that. So it'll be in the style, maybe a little crude, but in the style maybe of Ken Burns. You're going to see many pictures here. And there's going to be knowledge of what we learn in different ways, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So hopefully we can reach some of that through the different media here today. But as Tammy said, imagine the possibilities. That's what my story will be about in this journey, as we look at different stages of different possibilities, and could you imagine that maybe that'd be the outcome at different stages. 4,050, what could that maybe represent? Again, imagine the possibilities. Imagine the possibilities that you'd be listening to this little guy. Yes, I'm only 5'6", and we are 4,050 miles from Rapid City, NAU, and my home city where I was born, and that would be Panama City, Panama. 4050. Imagine the possibilities. As I said, I came from Panama, was born in Panama. And you can see maybe a picture of that. And if we look over towards the left of the country of Costa Rica, there's a city there called David, D-A-V-I-D. Close to that, on the Pacific Ocean side, is then where my mother, Lillian Martinez, came from. So Lillian came from that small fishing village up there by Costa Rica. And in her young life, such as the picture is showing here, she came from that town called Horconcito and came to Panama City to find work. And she found work as a maid for a sergeant. The sergeant's name was McGraw. And for that sergeant, then she became the maid. And there was a very terrible event that happened while she was a maid. There was an unwanted pregnancy, and she was living in Panama City, and only her one relative knew of this. And indeed, it was a terrible, stressful time to Lillian. Imagine the possibilities. Another family there lived in Panama, and these were the Bartlings. Now, the Bartlings, the wife to be my mother, Doris Bartling here, she came from originally Nebraska, northeast Nebraska, a little Indian village, reservation where the Omaha Native Americans lived there. And that's where she went to school. During World War II, she became Rosie the Riveter in Omaha, Nebraska, and worked on B-52s. Her Imagine the Possibilities was to be a teacher. She always wanted to be a teacher, and in fact, she became a teacher, and one of her first teaching jobs was a one-room schoolhouse in Nebraska. And in those days, you could get a teaching certificate without really getting a degree at that point. Sergeant Bartling. Now, Sergeant Bartling was born in South Dakota here, a little town called Bridgewater, South Dakota, about a few miles, 42 miles outside of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. His mother was a Russian Jew, and Edward Bartling was one of 12 children. And one claim to fame to Bridgewater and Edward Bartling is he went to school with Sparky Anderson. And maybe some of you say, who's Sparky Anderson? Who is that? He was a coach for the Cincinnati Reds. His other claim to fame was he checked in coats at a place called the Corn Palace here in South Dakota for Lawrence Welk. And maybe some of you will have to Google on who Lawrence Welk was, but that was what he did there. He was a career Army. He was in World War II, served under General Patton, and in fact, he was in the Battle of the Bulge, and he froze his feet. He dug a foxhole. The foxhole was dry. In the morning when he woke up, water came in, and he froze his feet. As a sergeant, he had a gift of gab, and he had a certain ability to use what my mother, Doris Bartling, would say was flowery language. He had the ability to get across in curse words what he wanted to. Example, SOS is what we'd eat for breakfast. You have been voluntold. And it took me many years to find out that Jesus' middle initial was an H. In fact, there were some phrases that he used I never heard another person say until along came a movie called Full Metal Jacket. And if you remember Gunny in that movie, who's now deceased, some of the phrases that he used, actually, Sergeant Bartling. But I said that they were married and they were childless. And so Doris kept praying, imagining the possibilities. And so a private adoption was done. Lillian kept me and gave birth to me. And 8 days after I was born, then there was a private adoption of me to then the Bartlings. And at that point, then I became Edward Dow Bartling. Before that, on my Panamanian birth certificate, it's Don Luis Martinez. But 8 days after I was born, there was a private adoption. Now, the Bartlings were in Colon, Panama. That would be on the Caribbean side. And after spending 3 years there, Doris got a little nervous in regards to whether that adoption would be fully legal and everything, since it was a private adoption. And so at that point, the Bartlings put in for a transfer. Imagine the possibilities. They were transferred to Germany, Baden-Baden, Germany. So here was this little 3 to 4 year old Panamanian speaking German, right there in the country of German. During that time and other times too, Doris, being the teacher, would use Bible stories to teach in regards to how I became their son. And so she would speak of Jochebed and Miriam, and then speak of Moses and how Moses was adopted and became a citizen of a great nation, and how then I possess, she would say, now you possess a very unique key, and that key will make you happy. And she would tell other stories such as David and Goliath, and how we're going to have Goliath in our lives, she would say, and how we can handle it is who we listen to and who we compare the task to. As she would say, many people were comparing Goliath to themselves, and David was comparing Goliath to God. And that was, again, one of many lessons that she shared with me. Always being this Barnabas. Look in the Bible, Barnabas means encourager. Indeed, that's what Doris was. And that key that she was speaking of was this: keep educating yourself. Whatever level that we're at, and Doris, again, being the teacher, she would always be that encourager, to encourage others to imagine the possibilities that are out there. And as even Sergeant Bartling said, serving under Patton, Patton would say, tell them what is needed and stand back. Tell them the goal and stand back. And also, Patton would say, don't let perfection be an enemy of good. Don't let perfection be an enemy of good. Well, growing up in the military as an Army brat, as they would call them, is a whole different subculture. It's really, if you think about a modern nomadic subculture, 2-3 years, families have to get up and move. So that we had to be, they are even today, resilient, and they adapt. Constant loss of friendships and ties. There's always the stress of loss of a parent. And within that culture, though, I can recall and feel good about that of honor and patriotism. If we were on base and it was 5 p.m., all of us children, we would stop playing wherever we were. We'd stand to attention because they were retiring the flags. If we went to a movie theater, before the movie started, we would stand up because they would then present colors there. So you would get that sense of, again, honor and patriotism. There was a sense of classism in the military, maybe even today yet, but that was more in regards to rank, not necessarily due to color of someone's skin. Again, Sergeant Bartling did become at the level of Sergeant Major. So he had the respect of not only the non-commissioned officers, but indeed also of the officers themselves. We come to learn that the military families don't make a lot of money, and they still don't today. And so many times you would have the spouses out working. And in fact, besides maybe doing substitute teaching, Doris Bartling would also do the seamstress work. One of the places that we were stationed at was Fort Carson, Colorado, which even National American University, I believe, has a location there in Colorado Springs. But that's where we were located. At that time, there were even mule trains there at Fort Carson. Well, the Bartling family, while living there at Fort Carson, had saved their money, and they were going to go take a long weekend and stay at a very special spot, the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs. Now, this was in the 50s, but even then they had to really save their dimes in order to be able to go there, which is a fantastic place there with the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, and of course the Broadmoor World Arena there, ice arena, and they had again saved their money. Well, I had been to those places, and during the afternoon then, young Dow Bartling asked, could he go down and get himself a treat? So he had some money. And so Sergeant Bartling said, sure, he could go down. And where would then young Master Bartling go to? He went to the Penrose room at the Broadmoor. Beautiful place. Well, there wasn't anyone there. It was very late in the afternoon. And so the waitress went and set the young man down and then asked what he would like. And he said he would like some ice cream. And so then they brought over a menu showing the different things available. And they would say, well, how much is this here? And they asked, how much did I have? And they had, that's what I had in my pocket. And they said, well, we could get you this particular Sunday right here, we would make special for you. And what I mean by that is the chef would be making that Sunday for you. And guess what the cost of this Sunday would be? 35 cents.
Cool.
Or we could have a regular Sunday. Well, Master Bartling then Indeed, eyes got as big as saucers in regards to that, because the chef went on and explained how that vanilla was special vanilla ice cream and how the nuts came from Europe and the whole thing like that. So Master Bartling ordered his ice cream and enjoyed it right down to the last drop. Well, it seemed to take a little while. And then finally, the Bartlings themselves came to check on Master Bartling because they were wondering where he was. And he comes to the entrance there, and up comes then a nurse, not a nurse, the waitress that had been waiting on Master Bartling. And she says, "Is this your son?" And Sergeant Bartling, in his tone, said, "Yes. What has he done?" And she said, "Sir, your young man here treated himself just like a gentleman. And it was a pleasure to wait on him today. And in fact, he had the choice of a dessert to order. And sir, he gave me the biggest tip that I've ever had. For you see, I didn't order the big sundae with all the different trimmings on, just ordered the plain, and then of course then gave the tip to the waitress of the 10 cents. The lesson there that had been taught years and years, if you're not helping someone in a day, you're spending your time wastefully and on yourself. You see, as I said, Sergeant Bartling was a sergeant major. So he had many of the non-commissioned personnel under him. Basically, whatever he said, they would do. There wouldn't be a pass of a dinner or particular Thanksgiving or Christmas that Sergeant Major Bartling did not bring some of those young men home. And we were like family to some of those young men that served under him. He became their father figure, and they became big brother to me. Again, if you're not helping someone in a day, you're spending your time wastefully on yourself. And so what was ingrained in me was, don't forget those that work with you and serve you. Whatever field that we're in, whatever field we may be going in, there's really only two things. It's people and systems. And people should be with a capital P. Imagine the possibilities. During his Army career, Sergeant Bartling had to go to Korea. Korea was the one place we could not go with him on. We had to stay back. And so in staying back, what sometimes families do in the military, my mother Doris and myself, we went to spend and live with her folks, my grandparents. This is the home that we lived in. It's what you would call a tar paper shack. It was on the Indian reservation in northeast Nebraska called Macy, Nebraska. The Omaha Indians originally lived in what we know as Omaha today. They moved the whole tribe up to northeast Nebraska, and my grandfather lived on that Indian reservation. He was a bus driver and a janitor for the school there. And during that time that he was doing that, I would help him. So he was a bus driver, and he would take then, of course, pick up the kids, and guess what? Take them home when school is out. When school is out, then my grandmother and myself, we would go and then clean the rooms in the school. And there was no concrete on the roads. There was no blacktop. So you can imagine the rooms would be very, very dirty. But we would sweep them out while he was doing then the bus. And when he got done, we pretty much got done at the same time. Well, he tells a story, and he was known very good. I loved his stories. He would say such stories and phrases such as, you probably heard, letting the cat out of the bag is a whole lot easier than putting him in. And every path is going to have some puddles, he would say. And my grandmother would say, when you wallow with the pigs, you can expect to get dirty. One story that I remember very much, he speaks in regards to a janitor of a school. And he had a thing with the 5th and 6th grade girls. It seemed like they were dirtying up the girls' bathroom. On the mirrors of the girls' bathroom, they would put lipstick all over those mirrors. And the principal would do everything they could to plead with the girls not to do that. And then they would try to station themselves outside the door, so again that they wouldn't do that. But it didn't seem to do anything. Then the janitor says to the principal, "Do you mind if I talk to the girls?" And the principal says, "We'll try anything right now, you bet." So he says, "Why don't you have all of the girls, the 5th and 6th grade girls, meet me in the girls' bathroom?" So that's what they did. They met in the girls' bathroom. And the janitor comes in and he's carrying a pail and a mop. And of course, then the principal tells them why they're there, why they pleaded with them not to do this. And then they turns it over to the janitor. And the janitor, just not a whole lot of words, says, "Maybe you don't know the whole cycle of things here in regards to when you dirty up the mirror, how it's clean. So I'd like to show you." And so there's that very clean pail of water and a mop, and he sets the mop aside. And he steps over to one of the bathroom stalls. And he dips the mop into the bathroom stall, slushes it around, wrings it out, and then cleans the mirror. Now, I don't know why, but ever since then, there was no lipstick on the mirror. And my grandfather's, then you might say, moral of that story was what? Every decision has a consequence. So you need to be asking yourself, do you have all the information that you need? And if you don't, then you need to seek others maybe to help you see the different sides of the particular thing that we're looking at, so we can make that decision. And again, every decision has a consequence. Do we have all the information that we need? As we go through, we're imagining the possibilities. As Tammy had mentioned, one of the things I do as a contributing author to the Chicken Soup for the Soul. This next particular part I would like to share, and it can be found, this story, and that's the entitlement of it, is Lessons from the Trees. Now, in growing up with the Bartlings and knowing that I was adopted, see, one of the things that I knew in growing up was I would look at continually, and again, imagining the possibilities, I would look at my birth certificate. You see, my birth certificate was in Spanish, and it was one of those hard old pieces of paper that was kind of hard. You can remember like the old Xerox machine type things where almost it would maybe fade away even. That was kind of what my birth certificate looked like. And as I said, it was all in Spanish. And so I would have it interpreted later. But one unique thing about that particular birth certificate, and really all birth certificates in Panama, they list your name. So think of your name. Then they list your mother's name. And then they'll list her mother's name. But they'll list it with their maiden name, not their married name. So there would be my name. There would be Lillian's name, but it would be with what the maiden name, and then there would be what Lillian's mother's name. That was my birth certificate, and I would have that was one of my prized possessions from Panama. But in agriculture, it's not uncommon, as you see here, to graft a branch from one tree to another, and that newly grafted part then grows from nourishment from that tree, and yet that branch, what doesn't lose its identity and where it came from. So you can see this example here of this grafted apple tree, and yet the one branch did not lose its identity. This story was told to me time and time again from the Bartlings, and as I was growing up, and there's a story in regards to me being nurtured, loved, and yet not losing my identity. Again, as I said, when I was 8 days old, I was then handed over to the Bartlings from Lillian Martinez. Again, I was loved and I was nourished. In fact, I was fortunate enough, even though Sergeant Bartling was a career military man, when he retired, I was fortunate enough to go to junior high and high school in the same school, which is quite an accomplishment for a military person. In fact, I was blessed to marry my high school sweetheart. In fact, my wife, LaDonna, there, will be married this year, 48 years. Also, I guess, in the sense of loyalty, and maybe you learn that too in regards to being a military brat, the sense of loyalty. I've really only had 2 occupations. One, I was a manager for the New York Life Insurance Company for a good number of years, and I've been affiliated with financial markets as one of the owners for over now 21 years. In financial markets being located in Rapid City, one of the things that we do, and if I can put a plug in, I encourage all of you to look at that, and that is an internship. And not think of in regards to maybe what am I going to get out of it, but what are you going to give to the intern? How are you going to be that Barnabas to that intern? Well, we had a intern, Jeremy, that came to us from Black Hills State, and he worked with us here at Financial Markets in Rapid City, South Dakota. Now, Jeremy was a little bit unique in thinking in regards to our lives and everything. You see, Jeremy's wife is from Panama. His in-laws are from Panama. And so Jeremy would many times talk to me about considering retiring in Panama. Panama uses the American dollar. What a nice place to live in this. And so one particular night, he gives me some websites to look at. And we've all probably looked at different websites in this. But I'm looking at one of those websites. And as I'm looking at those websites, pops up one of those pop-ups. You've probably all seen those annoying pop-ups that until you find the X and get it out of there, it's going to stay there. This pop-up came up and says, hey, we see that you're looking in regards to Panama. If you want to find things or we can help, I can help you. I am a detective. And Brett Mickelson, a U.S. citizen from Wisconsin, lives in Panama, and he indeed is a detective. Well, imagine the possibilities. So I contacted Brett, and I let him know of my story and said that there was always a yearning for me to find my family, and could he really assist me? And he came back and says, yep, I think I can help you. So I sent him a copy of my birth certificate. And while he was checking that out, I was also kind of checking him out. I was at a function in which there was a young man that we were honoring. Again, as Tammy mentioned, I was involved with the Boy Scouts. Well, this young man is an Eagle Scout, and he was then now in the military, in the Navy, and he was being honored. You see, he was on the battleship Cole. If you remember, battleship Cole was attacked by terrorists, and he was one of the survivors, and he helped others too, and he was being honored. And I asked him what he was doing now, and he was a detective. So Brett had some credentials, and I asked him, are these, you think, good credentials? He says, oh, yes. That means like a CPA is to an accountant is what those credentials are to a detective. So I went to Brett Mickelson and says, yes, please help me find my family. First thing Brett wanted was some money, and I just had to send money to him. Maybe you have, but I have never sent money by Western Union. So I go here locally, and I'm going to send Brett some money. I have to get out my checkbook, and Western Union says, Mr. Bartling, we don't take checks. It's got to be cash. I'm running to the cash machine, and at the cash machine then, I'm taking out money And then I take out more money. I take out more money. Next day, the bank calls me and says, Mr. Bartling, there's a bunch of withdrawals from your account. I say, yes, I know. And so I get the money sent to Brett. And he keeps me up to date. And it was almost a year. And it was the day of President Reagan's funeral. We closed the office that day. And that day was 6/11/2004. And I'm at home, and my wife calls me and says, did you look at your email? I says, no. She says, look at it. I said, what's it say? She says, it's from Brett. You need to look at it. Imagine the possibilities. I look at the email, and Brett says that he found my family, that he found my birth mother, Lillian, and that in using that birth certificate, he found another person who had the very same mother and the very same grandmother that had to be my sibling. And that was Norma, the lady that you see in the corner there, my sister. Now they asked Lillian if this was true, because the detective went to Norma and says, you have a brother. And she said, no, I don't know of any brother other than the two that I have. They asked Lillian if this was true, and Lillian said, yes, it was true. And in asking her, then under the stress, they had to put her in the hospital. Actually, in the very same hospital that I was born in Panama City. And Lillian told them, yes, it was true. You see, she was imagining the possibilities, and she faithfully, as a Catholic, was lighting a candle. And in lighting that candle, she was praying that before she died, she would then get word and have knowledge that I was okay and that everything was okay. And that she knew then that her prayers had been answered. And Brett says sometimes families will not want to see us once he finds them, but that was not the case at all. They did indeed want to see us. So my son Justin and I, we went to Panama a day before my birth mother's Lillian's birthday there. And we landed in Tocumen Airport in Panama. And we were kind of the last ones out. You have to go through then immigration. And in doing so, going through immigration, we were the last ones out. And then when we turned the corner, there was about 50 to 75 people with balloons and all kinds of things there. Now, my Spanish is un poquito, not very much. But there were people saying all kinds of things and everything. And one thing I heard was Eduardo, and that was my family. And the family was joyous in seeing us, and then again just covered us with love, with that love. And one of the places that my sister took us was at Old Mission. And at this Old Mission was kind of a tree that stood out kind of by itself. And I asked what that tree was, and she says, we call that the tree of Panama. And in looking at that tree, then I knew that indeed I had found my family tree and got the lessons from Panama. And here's a picture then of, was taken last year. Donna and I were fortunate to take a mission group from our church to Panama. And that's my brother Pedro, that's on my right. There's my little mother, Lillian. Look how tall I feel there standing next to her. My wife, LaDonna, my great nephew, then Adam. And there's my sister, Norma, and my sister-in-law, Iris. By the way, Pedro and Iris, they went to school in the United States. They went to school at the University of Nebraska. And here we are in another picture there. The gentleman next to me is my brother, Pedro. So that's all of Lillian's family there. There would be myself, there'd be Roger, there's Norma, and then there's Pedro. And there we are there. So indeed, please imagine the possibilities. The key is educating yourself through all type of means that you can do. Even if it's asking Alexia, what's the word of the day? Keep educating yourself. And every decision has a consequence. And do you have all the information that you need? And don't forget those that work with you and serve you. Now, I know you can't see me, but I had an old judge speak to me once and says, remember these three things, Edward. I said, what are those? He says, when you're speaking before a group, okay, stand up to be seen, speak up to be heard, and sit down to be appreciated. I thank you all for your time.
Oh, thank you, Edward. That was wonderful. I love how you showcased and featured people in your life and how those individuals helped you grow as a person and how they were such contributing pieces of your experience and journey. Really a neat presentation.
Thank you very much. Like I said, I tried to do it like a little bit like a Ken Burns type thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it was very unique, and I mean, your story is compelling on its face, but to the fact that you shared some really terrific takeaway lessons and advice that we can all live by made for a very compelling presentation. I really appreciate it.
You bet. You bet. Anytime.
Well, I will conclude the presentation now, but thank you again, Ed. It was really terrific, and a recording will be made available on YouTube in the near future.
Thank you.